Welcome to another edition of More Bad News, brought to you as always by Camel Cigarettes. Take the Camels Challenge. Smoke Camels for 30 days and see for yourself what a change tobacco can bring to your life. After my parents retired to Albuquerque, New Mexico, I would visit and sit with my mom around the breakfast table with black coffee and her favorite smokes, Salem's or Newports. My mom was put under a lot of pressure to stop smoking, especially after her first heart attack. She died in 1987 at the age of 72. My dad, who never smoked cigarettes, he smoked cigars, died at 87. Despite the fact that women live longer than men, she died 15 years earlier than my dad. And at least some of that loss was due to smoking. But she knew that. My mom chose a shorter life with smoking rather than a longer life without it. I stopped smoking decades ago. Actually, I didn't originally stop smoking. At first, I just quit buying cigarettes. 30 years ago, when I came to Ferris, we still had a faculty smoking lounge, and my colleague Clarence DeLong, one of the senior faculty, smoked Kent's, and he smoked in his office, and he had this huge ashtray that was filled with hundreds of butts, just like an archaeological treasure. And occasionally I would wander into his office and I'd sit down and I'd ask if I could bum a cigarette. He was always happy to share a smoke, and this brought us together. I was much closer to him than to Paul Spagnolo, the other senior faculty member who didn't smoke. Well, it's been another week of bad news. Science magazine reports that half of all Americans anticipate a US civil war soon. Another way to put that is that half of the US citizens are preparing right now for civil war, while the other half are actively afraid that we're headed for a civil war. Actually, the Civil War began on January 6th, 2020, and this November is going to be just a continuation. The Republic ended in 2016. The Civil War began in 2020. Science magazine also reported that the combined storage in Lake Powell and Lake Mead, the two largest reservoirs of fresh water in the United States, we're not talking about the Great Lakes, we're talking about reservoirs of water. These are from the Colorado River. Lake Powell, Lake Mead supplies water to over 40 million people and the most productive agricultural region in the country. So the water level in these two reservoirs has climbed from 95% in 2000 to 25% today. Now, here's a math question for you. If the water level fell by 70% in 20 years, that's 35% per decade, and there's 25% left, how long will it take for the reservoir to run bone dry? The answer, my friends, is blowing in the wind. But when the water runs dry, the entire agricultural production of the region will collapse. The premise of this show is that everything that we ever thought we knew for sure has turned out to be totally untrue, and that we never see genocide coming. The idea that we have a future is an illusion. The idea that we can bring peace to the world is an illusion. We tend to think that things, especially bad things, big things like the United States, Russia, China, just can't collapse overnight. But the Ottoman Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Tsarist Empire, all collapsed in a matter of a few years as a result of the First World War. The same will happen to all the empires that exist today. None will survive the coming apocalypse. Human organization itself will collapse, and the cause is obvious and inexorable. The planet is very soon going to stop sustaining life. Crops are going to fail on a massive scale, and people will begin to starve in the tens and hundreds of millions. In the Jewish calendar, we are right now in the latter part of the 3 weeks of mourning. Next Sunday, we're going to be celebrating the 9th of August, the celebration, the commemoration of the destruction of the first and second temples. So we're reading Jeremiah, who prophesied. Jeremiah didn't say repent or else. Jeremiah said you're going to be destroyed because you have failed to repent. So next week we're going to read from the book of Lamentations, Echa in Hebrew. The author was a witness to the destruction of Jerusalem, and the descriptions are just shocking, even after 2,600 years. Quote, Should women eat the babies, infants in their arms? And Robert Alter, who has translated the entire Hebrew Bible, a monumental achievement, notes this horrific specter of cannibalism under the duress of starvation repeatedly haunts biblical literature, and there are grounds to infer that it sometimes actually happened. Last week, there was a request for clarification about my views on abortion. Eric asked, where do you draw the line for abortion? 3, 6, 9 months after birth? I thought that was a good question. So I wanted to start with this verse from Lamentations. Should women be forced to destroy their own babies? If a woman is forced to give a birth to a child, that destroys her sanity and makes her life a living hell, as my brother Marty did for my mom, is it any wonder that she would destroy his life? Human beings can be extraordinary saints, but most human beings are simply human. And at some point, trauma and stress can easily destroy a person. And please, don't play the adoption card. The pregnancy itself can destroy the mother. As in the case of rape and incest, where the child who has been raped can be utterly destroyed by a self-righteous Republican who insists that he knows the mind of God and he can stand in for God and determine under all circumstances that the fetus must be preferred over the mother. So first off, I want to explain that Jewish law is unequivocal. The life of the mother always takes precedent over the life of the fetus. My mom had 8 pregnancies, 6 live births. 1 fetus was lost spontaneously, but 1 was aborted at a time when it was illegal. And my mother told me that she hemorrhaged after the abortion and nearly died. She said that birth control never worked for her. She couldn't tolerate the diaphragm's rubber. IUDs weren't invented until the 1980s. There was no way for her to prevent the pregnancy. So despite the fact that my parents were ready to start a family, and I'm not talking about inconvenience. You remember, her mother was suffering from Alzheimer's, and there was and her younger brother was living with her mother with dementia. My dad's parents were unemployed, and there was a child there too. All this fell on my mother. She told me that the pregnancy itself was extremely difficult. And then there was this baby boy who my mom said was never normal. He showed symptoms of psychosis by the age of 3, and he died a homeless psychotic at the age of 59 in Cook County Hospital in Chicago. I got a call from the hospital saying that my brother was dying. As his closest living relative, they wanted to know if they should try to resuscitate him. Without hesitation, I said, no, let him go. So, Eric, I want you to understand, I aborted my brother's life 59 years after his birth, and I see it as one of the most merciful things I have ever done. Now, back to abortion before birth. I'm Jewish. I'm an atheist, so I don't believe Jewish law is divine, but it's the ethical system that I generally go to work out ethical issues. Exodus 21, 22 to 25. If 2 men fight together and they hit a pregnant woman and she loses the fetus, that's a crime, but it's not murder and it's not manslaughter. Jewish law looks at the fetus even at childbirth, when it is really a fully formed baby. Still, Jewish law puts the life of the mother before the life of the baby, because she is a living human being with status. She's been in the world for years, and that gives her a status as a living human being. This baby has not left her body yet. It's not in the world yet. It doesn't have rights over her. Her rights are more powerful than his. You sacrifice the child to save the mother, always. Jewish law considers a fetus at whatever gestational stage it to be a rodef if it threatens the life of the mother. A rodef is somebody who comes to kill you. In Jewish law, if somebody is running to kill you, a rodef, coming after you to kill you, you are obligated to defend yourself and kill the rodef and save your life. That's an obligation. It's a moral obligation. Jewish law looks at a fetus that is threatening the life of the mother as a rodef. And this is interpreted in individual cases. So, for example, Jewish courts have ordered an abortion for a fetus that threatened the mother's emotional health if there was credible fear that she might commit suicide. It is enough to permit the termination of the pregnancy, to mandate the termination of the pregnancy. You're not allowed to put this woman's life at risk. Jewish law focuses on each individual case so that you can't decide all cases. You can't decide 3 months, 6 months, this trimester, that trimester. On the other hand, the fetus is obviously a potential human being. And Jewish law takes that very seriously. Jewish law doesn't condone abortion in all cases and doesn't have any kind of blanket statement. Of course, Jewish law doesn't apply to people who aren't Jewish. Catholics and Jews have very different opinions about abortion. And in my view, it is unethical to force me to live by Catholic views of abortion any more than it would be to force a Catholic to live by my views. Now, the Iroquois were a matriarchal society. We don't have these anymore, but imagine if in order to hold high office, you had to be a grandmother. Only grandmothers could be president, serve in the Senate, etc. Among the Iroquois, the clan mothers, these were elder women, grandmothers. They were senior political and social leaders of the tribe. They chose the chiefs, for example. If they were disappointed in a chief, they could remove him. Furthermore, the clan mothers determined the will of the people. They would instruct the chiefs, for example, that they could sign trade agreements with the British, but not military alliances with them in their war against the French. The clan mother's power was waning by 1756 when the French and Indian War began, and they were unable to restrain the tribes from choosing sides and thus breaking the great law that bound the Six Nations together. It was devastating. Now, matriarchal societies in general, I believe, are superior to patriarchal societies in two important respects. When grandma was in charge, the men did not abuse women and children. There is hardly any rape, and marital abuse is there's almost no child abuse. Grandma simply wouldn't put up with that kind of behavior, and they organized their society to ensure the safety of young women. First, a man had to ask grandma for permission to marry her granddaughter. Second, when he married her, he moved into her family longhouse. That is, he moved in with her family. He was surrounded by her dad, her brothers, her uncles, and if he displeased her, all she had to do was to remove his belongings from the longhouse, and he was no longer welcome. Good luck finding another grandma who's going to trust you with her granddaughter. Now, the Iroquois thought on abortion, and I got this online from George Kenitio and Akwesasne Mohawk, and it's titled Abortion and the Iroquois. So if you Google abortion and the Iroquois, you'll find the article. Now, he served as the vice president of the Hiawatha Institute for Indigenous Knowledge. He previously served as a trustee for the National Museum of American Indians. He is a former land claim negotiator for the Mohawk Nation, and he's the author of numerous books and articles on the Mohawk people. Good source. He says, abortion in Native societies is a complex issue involving family, clan, and community. There are very specific teachings which discourage this act. Should a woman actually conceive and elect not to give birth, she had direct access to plants which would terminate the pregnancy. Ending a pregnancy did not involve the machinery of government, nor did it have any legal repercussions. No man was allowed to have any control over that decision. Some social and economic circumstances should be taken into consideration, such as those experienced by people subject to genocide for over 2 centuries. There are times when it was likely that the baby would be born amidst suffering, and the mother might elect to prevent its entry into a hostile world. This happened to Jewish women at Auschwitz all the time. Women came to Auschwitz pregnant, and women doctors in Auschwitz risked their lives to perform abortions in order to save the lives of the mother, because this baby had zero chance of a happy life, of any kind of existence. Such actions were taken by the native people of the Caribbean when confronted by the murderous actions of the Spanish invaders. Better, they reasoned, to have the embryo remain unborn than face rape, mutilation, and slavery. But you can also understand that people subject to genocide don't want to have their options to have children denied to them, as was done to 25% of Native American women, according to federal judge Gerhard Gesell in a famous 1974 federal court ruling that brought an end to government-sponsored eugenic sterilization on Indian reservations. At least in some cases, the Iroquois viewed abortion as a mother's wish to save a child from prolonged pain and suffering. The current movement in the US to outlaw abortion is perceived by the Iroquois as an attempt by men to control the birthing process and to return women to their former condition of servitude. So that wraps it up for another week of more bad news. Remember, take the Camels Challenge, smoke camels for 30 days, and see for yourself what a difference it can make. I will be with you again next week, hopefully.